All right, so we are in 2 Corinthians. Depending on how fast we go, we can finish up the book today. Like it's very consistent in its theming as it kind of ends, and but it's a couple chapters, so we're going to try to do that. If it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen though. And so, but this is a very cool, sarcastic chapter from the Apostle Paul. And we ended, let's see, where did we end?
9. We started 9, almost started 9.
Well, we're in 10 now.
10 somewhere.
Yeah, we're in 10. I think we're in 11. I think we're at the beginning of 11. So I'm.
That's what I had marked. I had my paper in there.
Oh yeah, like
That 11.
11.
10, 11, 12.
Yeah, I think we're like at 11 verse 7. But I'll so I'll read through 2 Corinthians chapter 11, 1 through 15 in the NIV, and then we can kind of start talking through it. So I hope that you would put up with me in a little bit of foolishness. Now this is important. For the next 2 chapters, he talks about this foolishness, right? I hope that you put up with me just a little bit of foolishness. Yes, please put up with me. I am jealous for you with a godly jealousy. I promised you to one husband, to Christ, so that I might present you as a pure virgin to him. But I am afraid that just as Eve was deceived by the serpent's cunning, your minds may somehow be led astray from your sincere and pure devotion to Christ. For if someone comes to you and preaches a Jesus other than the Jesus we preached, or if you received a different spirit from the spirit you received, or a different gospel from the one you anticipated, you put up with it easily enough. All right, I just want to say a few words about here. He's talking about Eve being deceived and kind of comparing them to Eve and all this husband language. Then he says, if someone preached to you a different Jesus, like he is saying that there's other people that are preaching these other kind of gospels, these other Jesuses to there, and he's saying, if anyone gives you anything different than what we give you, and he's about to go into that all the more. And just as he began talking about, like, with the struggle of what it meant to be an apostle, of the struggle of that, he's going to hit all that again as he continues to boast about it. So verse 5. I do not think that I am in the least inferior to those super apostles. I may indeed be untrained as a speaker, but I do have knowledge. We have made this perfectly clear to you in every way. Was it a sin for me to lower myself in order to elevate you by preaching the gospel of God to you free of charge? I robbed other churches by receiving support from them so as to serve you. And when I was with you and needed something, I was not a burden to anyone, for the brothers who came from Macedonia supplied what I needed. I have kept myself from being a burden to you in any way, and will continue to do so, as surely as the truth of Christ is in me. Nobody in the regions of Achaia will stop this boasting of mine. Why? Because I do not love you. God knows that I do. Let's talk about that for just 1 second. Think about what he's saying here. Have I been a burden on you? Like these people are accusing him of not being as good as these super apostles, as he's calling them. And what's his retort from that? These guys have asked you for everything, and we know who these super apostles are. We can see them. Like, what's that Steve Martin movie back in the day where he was a super apostle? What do you remember? Do you remember that he was a TV preacher? That was back in the 80s, wasn't it? Oh, you guys are.
It's starting all over. Idea of that one.
Yeah, like it's what like we know these, like Steve Martin's making. Yeah. Steve Martin what's the name of that movie? But he starts off life and then he starts feeling bad about it. It's a Steve Martin movie. It's funny, but he's doing all the tricks to get money out of people, saying, and people are looking up people's names and all that stuff, trying to figure out. And they got a little microphone in his ear, so you'd be able to find out information about him. And it sounds like he's receiving prophetic words, and he's just a shyster. But like these people have come in, and they're like these what we would regard as a TV preacher. It's like you gotta have that seed money. We gotta have that seed money coming in here, and all that stuff. We have all this language. This is still around, and Paul's retort is like, I haven't been a burden on you. That was never our message, which I kind of think is fascinating. So
if I could just say two things.
Yeah.
One thing that comes out to me, and this one says, did I commit sin by humbling myself? And as what he's doing is he's talking about Jesus being so humble. That's the way it should be taught.
Yeah.
Not with the money ideas that are going around about it.
Yeah,
so I think I get that out of it. And the other thing that's connecting with me right now is when you think about burdening, I think that people who are outrightly just exposing themselves to the virus are winding up being a burden on people, and they're not considering that.
Yeah, it's interesting when you think about like the burden relationship and how he's like, listen, like, did I come to take a burden off of you, or did I put it on you? One of the notes I wrote down here is that Satan often comes like a servant of light, and and he's trying to like distort the gospel, trying to distort what's going on. And Paul's kind of trying to call the church back. It's like these deceivers have come as servants of the light, but look at what's actually going on. Look at the fruit. Look at all this stuff. And I think he's saying that the way he's saying, look at the fruit right here, is that burden. Like, did we come and take a burden off of you? And that's something that I saw, I don't know, a while back now. And that's one of the ways that I try to put it. And I say this as a good reminder for myself all the time, is when we talk about the good news of Jesus Christ, are we actually talking about good news? Or are we telling people you need to comply to the good news? Yeah, you need to fit in the box of the good news. And that's like, and suddenly people will sit back and go, well, that's not good news. That's what's the good news about it? I'm actually preaching the sermon on Sunday, so I'll get off of that. But yeah, the good, he's actually talking about good news. I think a burden. So that's I'm glad you guys slowed us down on that. So 12. And I will keep on doing what I'm doing in order to cut the ground from under those who want an opportunity to be considered equal with us in the things they boast about. For such people are false apostles, deceitful workers, masquerading as apostles of Christ. And no wonder, for Satan himself masquerades as an angel of light. That's probably why I wrote that there. And it's not surprising then if his servants also masquerade as servants of righteousness. Their end will be what their actions deserve. Now, I love that last little phrase. Their end will be what their actions deserve. That is probably the closest to anything karma-like that Paul will ever say. And I like to say this a lot. I'm making myself the hero in here. I hate doing that, but I like to say this. It's like, I don't believe in karma, but it's amazing how things work out. Yeah, like that. That's and I think, like, if these people are constantly masquerading as angels of light, like, they're gonna get found out. Mm-hmm. You can only fake it for so long.
That's what happens with a lie.
Yeah, it comes with a lie. Like all that.
Keep having to make new ones to hide the old one.
Like that's you can only you can only masquerade around, and I think that's what. So he's not really saying karma, but I think he's just that universal principle of like, you can only lie so much. You can only. Yeah, it'll catch up with you, and
it makes me think that this one says their end will match their deed.
Okay, yeah.
And I think that instead of karma, so to speak, what makes me think is that doesn't fit God's purpose. So, therefore, watch what happens.
Well, and I think when our goal is to manipulate people, when our goal is to lie to people, and all of that stuff, it will catch up. Like that's, like I think that's a very sturdy pillar in just our understanding of humanity, and I think that's a truth there, and I think that's what Paul is saying, and he's going to go into a whole other thing going forward here as he talks about that idea. That you can only masquerade for so long as something that you're not. You're going to get found out, and that's what that reminds me of. The Baptist Church in Texas had the same problem. They had a child molestation issue with their youth workers. Well, that was like 3 years ago. It was right before COVID. And what they were doing is these people would be found out in the individual churches, but the churches wouldn't escalate it at all, and they would just fire the person, and that person would just move to the other town.
Yeah.
And so he was masquerading as this servant, and he kept getting found out. And it finally happened with enough people where it was found out in a whole state, like that's, and I think that happens. I think that happens a lot. Like that's,
That's what the Catholic Church did with the priests. They just transferred them.
Yeah, it's the same story. It was the same story. And eventually it was found out, and you can watch a movie about it. It's called Spotlight. and that movie's pretty good. And I think some of that is the church, like today, like we're worried about the future of the congregations and future of the churches, and like, people aren't coming back to it, and I think a lot of our churches and stuff like that over the years, we realize that we do things this way, we can make a tidy sum of money doing it, and pay for people doing these things. And if that becomes the goal, which I worry it has in a lot of circumstances, I mean, you got people like me that it's like, you do this for a living, buying stuff with it, and buying groceries and all that stuff, and it's easy for that to become a goal. And I think the outside world then looks at it and goes, well, is that all you are? And I think and I don't know, I'm just positing this out there, but are we in one of those times where our masquerading as a servant of light, when actually we've just been obsessed with money, is that becoming found out? Money and power, is that being found out, and we're just in a cycle where there's going to be a correction, and then it'll go up there, and I'm making it much neater and cleaner than it actually is. It's much more messy than that. But
that's true in a lot of professions.
Yeah. I mean, you saw it. Like, I hear a lot of your fire department stories.
Yeah.
And like your fire department stories are much like that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
yeah. Like that. It's like, oh yeah.
Power.
Yeah, power.
Not necessarily money in that case, but volunteer fire department. But now it's even money, because the department that I was in is now, 99% paid.
Yeah.
And they're in a city which is 200 plus years old.
Yeah.
And so are all the houses.
Yeah.
Ready to burn.
Yeah, ready to go. Ready to just go up as kindling. But that desire for power and influence, I mean, that's really what this current Mark sermon series is about, is this evaporating of that power. As we see, it evaporates when we get to the cross, and so you see that coming forward, and this is, so we go to verse 16 now and 11. You can see Paul begin to be sarcastic and starts making fun of this. And I think looking at it through that lens really, really helps. So what I would like to do, I was reading out of the NIV. I'm going to read it out of this other translation. So if there's something very different in one of your translations, just, stop me and we'll talk about the differences. So verse 16 of chapter 11, I'll say it again. Don't let anyone think I'm a fool, but if they do, well, all right then. Welcome me as a fool, so that I can do a little bit of boasting. You see, you hear the sarcasm. That's why I like this translation. It allows the sarcasm to go through. Verse 17, what I'm going to say now, I'm not saying as if it came from the Lord, but as if I was a fool. As if I really did want to indulge myself in this kind of boasting, like those super apostles are doing. Verse 18, plenty of people are boasting in human ways, in human terms. After all, so why shouldn't I boast as well? So if these other people are boasting, why can't I do it? After all, you put up with fools readily enough, since you yourselves are so wise. You put up with it if someone makes you a slave, or if they eat up your property, or overpower you, or give themselves airs, or slap you in the face. Well, I'm ashamed to say it. We weren't strong enough for that, now were we? Like, think about the sarcasm that's coming out there. I'll close this door. That Kevin being so loud. The thing about the sarcasm that he says out there, and think about the truth of what he's saying. After all, we put up with fools readily enough, we put up with someone and make it their slave, or they end up taking our property, or they end up all of a sudden. He's like, we've been so enamored with power, is how I would use it, but so enamored with this boasting that we were completely willing to let them overpower us and just take advantage of us. Man, you see that in the world all over the place, don't you? It's so, you see it, and we find even our own selves. We find ourselves in those things. I would say multi-level marketing companies is a good example of that. So where you look back and you're like, well, I feel sheepish now. That's what he's saying. I think he's pointing out the condition. You can hear the sarcasm. And he's like, well, I guess we weren't strong enough for all of that. So continuing with verse 21. Whatever anyone else dares to boast about, I'm talking nonsense, remember, I'll boast as well. Are we Hebrews? Yeah, so am I. Are we Israelites? Yeah, so am I. Are they a seed of Abraham? Yeah, so am I. Are they servants of the Messiah? Listen, I'm talking like a raving madman. I'm a better one. I've worked harder. And then he defines what it means that he's worked harder. I've worked harder. I've been in prison more. I've been beaten more times than I can count. And I've often been close to death. 5 times I've had the Jewish beating, 40 lashes less 1. 3 times I've been beaten with rods. Once I was stoned. 3 times I was shipwrecked. I was adrift in the sea for a night and for a day. I've been constantly traveling, facing dangers from rivers, dangers from brigades, dangers from my own people, dangers from foreigners, dangers in town, dangers in the countryside, dangers at sea, dangers from false believers. I've toiled and labored. I've burnt the candle at both ends. I've been hungry and thirsty, and I've often gone without food altogether, and I've been cold and naked. Like, look at how he put that together. Like, he's been talking about boasting in this holy way, and then all of a sudden, all of a sudden he digs the knife in by going, yeah, we've boasted about all this strength, and we let those people with all the strength plunge the knife into us. You know? And then he goes, but boast. You know? So let's talk about boasting. And then if we remember what he talked about in the first few chapters of this book, it's all about what it means to be the Messiah. You know, what it means to be an apostle, what it means to be Christ's person. It's like I don't boast in that I've received this holy word of God, which he's going to start making fun of down a little bit lower. He's like boasting like I am bearing the image of the cross daily. You know, like it's over there. And what's interesting is we even still have this to a tinge today. I wrote a note about this. Oh, we're not to the verse yet. Okay. We still have this today, and it was very strong in Roman times, this sense of like, well, if things aren't going well for you, well, then God is no longer with you. It's like, why would you follow a leader that's all this bad stuff is obviously he's not praying enough. You know, like that's a sense that we have, right? And so that's and he's like Paul is saying, no, that's false. That's false. That's when you look at it that way, you're allowing those leaders that want to be seen that way to bury that knife in you, to take everything from you, to make you a slave. So I don't know. Yeah. If anyone has anything to say, just pop it out.
The only comment he was talking about dangers from foreigners and Gentiles.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I thought it was really interesting that in this one whole paragraph, he talked about Hebrews, he talked about Abraham, he talked about Israelites and Gentiles.
Yeah, he's talking about everybody. Everybody, right? Everybody. I said then verse 28 is quite apart from all of that. I have this daily pressure on me, my care for all of the churches. Who is weak, and I'm not weak? Who is offended without me burning with shame? You see him taking it on? Like he's like what? Like I haven't just taken from this. I'm feeling the same emotions that you are. And in verse 30, he continues going. If I must boast, I will boast of my weakness. The God and the Father. All right. Before we read this, we have to look at what's going on in Rome during this time before we read this, and I think you'll think it's fascinating. There was the highest award that a Roman soldier could get was called I wrote it down. Called the Corona Murtis, which in English is the walled crown. And what that was is, they didn't really view things as like nations as we do now. They kind of did, but everything was like city-based, and cities all had walls around them. And so whatever soldier could get over the wall first when they were going after a city would receive this highest honor that a Roman soldier could receive. All right, that he was the one that was receiving the thing, which normally meant that was that soldier's life. But perhaps that money would go to their in glory in Valhalla. They could be that's. I don't think Rome was a Valhalla nation, but you know what I'm talking about. Like that's that they would have this glory to themselves. Now, with that knowledge, let's read this next section because I think Paul is referencing that here. So verse 30, if I must boast, so it gives her some boasting again. I will boast in my weakness. If the God and Father of the Lord Jesus, who is blessed forever, knows that I am lying, in Damascus, King Artus, the local ruler, was guarding the city of Damascus so that he could capture me. But I was let down in a basket through a window over the wall, and I escaped his clutches. I think about that Roman thing. It's the exact opposite of what he just said. He's running away, but he's using the same terminologies. And he's like, if I must boast. Well, and it's almost like he's making jokes there, right? If you boast, look at me, I got away. I came down the wall. You guys always glorify these guys who are able to climb the wall, and over there. And it's like, yes, if I must boast, I will boast about when I came down the wall in a basket. like that. And all right, let's continue on. Chapter 12. And I just have to boast. Not that there's anything to be gained by it, but I'll go on to visions and revelations of the Lord. Someone I know in the Messiah. All right, let me stop here for a second. In college, I wrote about 25 pages on the next 7 verses here. Mm-hmm. Like that. That's over there, and I'm still learning about this today. I was an idiot back then, so but I know more than I should about this little section here. So yeah, exactly. So I just have to boast. Not that there's anything to be gained by it, but I'll go into visions and revelations of the Lord. Now, someone I know in the Messiah 14 years ago. Now, he's talking about himself.
Are you really sure, or is that John?
I think he's talking about himself.
When you read Revelation, that passage where John is up there, it seems to fit right in there.
So I think he's talking about his Damascus Road experience. Yeah. So here's why I think that. It could be John. It could be wrong. Here's why I think that. He goes, if I have to boast, we'll do it. And then he starts talking about this. Yeah. And it goes into a story that doesn't make any sense.
Right.
So and when we read this, we need to remember that everything he's saying here is wrong. Not wrong that it was happened incorrectly, that he's lying, that it's not our typical understanding of power. Normally I think I was making fun of this on Sunday too. And one of the things, normally when we think oh man, if I could just get close to God, then I would understand the mysteries of the world, right? That's not what happens here. That's and there's all these, we always have these myths inside of Christianity of people that died and they were given tours of heaven and all that stuff. And they always come back with all this flowery knowledge about what it was all like. Paul is lighting a match under all of that with this next thing, which is interesting. Think about what he says. All right, let's read it. So, and it could be John. And if it is John, it's the same thing. He's doing the same thing.
Read Revelation's first chapter.
Yeah.
He almost quotes that word for word.
Yeah.
That's why I connected it that way.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that's good. That's good. So let's read through this because he's doing the same thing, even if it is John. He's doing the same thing. So someone I know in the Messiah 14 years ago, whether in the body or not out of the body, I don't know. God knows. Was snatched up to the third heaven. Okay, the third heaven. there's two ways we could understand this here. In the cosmos understanding of that day and time, there could be two understandings of heaven. One is you have earth, you have where the birds are, and then you have where the gods are. So you'd be caught up to the third heaven. What I kind of think, because of the context of what's going on here, is that there was a Roman concept that there were actually 7 heavens. Yeah. And so yeah, you've heard of that. Yeah. And so again, with all of his sarcasm that he's going on here, he's like, if I'm going to boast, I'm going to boast. I made it all the way up to the third heaven. He didn't make it up to the 7. Yeah, like that's like, you know, if you like, that's why I'm like, gosh, this is so sarcastic. If you let it be sarcastic, it's like, if I'm going to boast, I'm going to boast. Like, I know this guy made it all the way up to the third heaven, you know, made it all the way up to the third heaven. And then let's see here. So we keep on going. I know this someone person, whether in the body or outside the body, I don't know. God knows. This person was snatched up to paradise and heard words that you can't pronounce, words which humans aren't allowed to repeat. Like, think about that. With all those stories of the heavens that we often hear about, with all that stuff, he's making fun of them. Then that probably makes us uncomfortable. Like but he's saying, like, yeah, I was caught up there, and I didn't come back with some amazing word. I came back with like gibberish, right? So I will boast of someone like that, but I won't boast of myself except of my weakness. Because if I did want to boast, you see, I wouldn't be mad. I'd be speaking the truth. But I'm holding back so that no one will think anything of me except that we can see in me or hear from me, even considering how remarkable the revelations were. So, like, it's interesting, like he's being, like, I think he's being kind of sarcastic here, and kind of like, we expect when we come to God, all these things are just going to be hunky-dunky and everything's going to be explained. And then he's like, no. Like, it's over here. Like, I saw things, yes. Or John saw things, if you want to go there. It could be the same meaning no matter which one it is. Yeah, it's like, you know, saw things, yes, but I couldn't bring any of them back, you know? And then, and he gets kind of somber here. And as we continue with 7, about halfway through 7, as a result, so that wouldn't become too exalted, a thorn was given to me in my flesh, a messenger from Satan himself, to keep stabbing away at me. And I prayed to the Lord 3 times. He's going into sarcasm here again. 3 times about this, asking him to be taken away from me. Now, we remember all these stories, right? Like, you have Nahum cleaning himself in the river, right, with the leprosy. You have all these stories throughout where it's like, I washed once, and but I needed to wash again, you know, so I washed again. And finally, I washed to the holy number, 3 or 7 or something like that, and finally was able to be cleansed of it. It seems like he's saying, it's like, I had this thorn. It's like he's following, because we've heard all these testimonies from people over the years, you know? It's like, I did this, and man, the Lord healed me up, and like, praise him. And Paul's like, and I had a thorn in my flesh, and I prayed to the Lord, I prayed 3 times for this to be taken from me. And this is what he said to me. My grace is enough. My power comes to perfection inside of my weakness. Like, it's this wild boiling down of the essential gospel message, where we see that salvation comes from Jesus, not in the worldly power that we regard, but in the weakness of it all, that it seems in the cross that we find salvation, the power of the Lord in salvation, right? And like Paul just is nailing that to a wall right there. And it's fascinating to me at how deft he's using what I would call sarcasm to move through there. Like, I asked 3 times, but the answer was, "No, my grace is fine for you." You know, and it's weird, because oftentimes I think in our own selves we think that the going up to the other side of the mountain of whatever our struggle is going to come by power. But I think there's something very comforting in the message of the gospel, that even when I'm powerless, Jesus is still lifting me up.
Strong. Yeah.
There's still prayer. There's still hope.
Yeah. That there's over there, and that's been the thing that I've probably realized the most in the last 8 years or so, you know, of being a pastor, because I had to at the last church.
Doesn't this kind of explain the whole core of Paul's attitude?
I think so. I think so, because like when you start reading it like this, it sounds like a very sarcastic version of Philippians chapter 2. You know?
Philippians chapter 7.
Yeah, like that. Yeah, like that. That's really what it sounds like. It sounds like an extremely sarcastic version of Philippians chapter 2.
Yeah, it does.
Like that. And he's going through that, because Philippians chapter 2, I love that. So let's see here. So let's continue going. So my grace is made perfect. This is like the middle of 9. So I will be all the more pleased to boast of my weakness, so that the Messiah's power may rest upon me. So verse 10. So I'm delighted when I'm weak, insulted, in difficulties, persecuted, and facing disasters for the Messiah's sake. Because when I'm weak, you see, then I'm strong.
I love that.
And that's, I tell you, being here, and you know, oftentimes when I'm preaching or trying to encourage the congregation in a certain way, I'm trying to encourage myself in that too, you know. And that's the biggest thing that I've seen around here, is we've done some pretty big things for this little church with the building here and all that stuff. It has had a tinge of the way I like to communicate it, because the way I like to communicate it to myself too, is that if it all goes away, it's no big deal.
We still have.
Does it hurt? Yeah, it'll hurt. It'll be a sad day, but like the cross is a sad day, you know. And but you know, in those times, you know, like you realize it's like, oh man, like it looks like weakness to the world to say stuff like that, but actually that's like the power of the Creator coursing through it, you know. And that's, yeah, you know.
Well, if you consider history of this property right here,
Yeah.
you know, the community church that was here,
Yeah.
where they all felt so complacent that they were great with the people they had, and visitors came, they just, you know.
Oh, really? Yeah.
And they failed. They went out of existence.
Yeah.
But then we came.
Yeah.
So everything will continue in this world.
It will. Like if
with
grace,
us or without us.
if grace goes away, like
Somebody will buy it.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
Alzheimer's.
Yeah. Exactly. And that's like when you become cool with that, like that's, I think you start seeing that, oh, God can still work through all this and through all of us, even in our terrible weaknesses and sinfulnesses, right? Like that's yeah. Like and I think that's really good news for us. Then it's good news. It's good news for me too. And I think that's a news that resonates with people. So verse 11. So I've been a fool, and you forced me into it. If I was to have received an official condemnation, it ought actually to have come from you. Commendation. I read that wrong. So like if you actually gave me a letter of, remember at the beginning he was saying like, you want me to send you a letter of my accomplishments, which that was a very Roman thing. And that's still a thing that we are kind of obsessed with. Like think about the grand openings here, and whenever we would introduce like a speaker, we'd list off everything that they've done, right? like that's
like a resume.
Yeah, like a resume.
Maybe the Rome started resumes.
Yeah. Well, but it's like a list of power. That's that list of power, and so
you're making fun of my book.
Yeah. Not directly. But no, I'm just pointing out that we do this all the time. Think about I'm not a big fan of it, but the classic LCMS confession of sins. Think about what the pastor says as a called and ordained servant of the word. I like over there. It's almost like a qualification, a list of stuff going before it, and that's always rubbed me a little weird, because when you listen to like presidents talk and all that stuff, they use exactly the same words before they make decrees, and I'm like, I don't know. So I like to just say your sins are forgiven. Like I just like rather than having all the stuff before it. That's not a righteous thing. That's just more of a Chris thing. So remember at the beginning of this book, they wanted him to send a letter explaining all of the reason why they should support him, and now he's gone. It's like, you guys realize you should have been the one that sent this letter to me. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then he goes, after all, I'm not inferior to the super apostles, even though I'm nothing. And then verse 12, the signs of the true apostles, you see, were performed among you in all patience, with the signs and wonders and powers. In what way have you been worse off than the other churches, except in the fact that I myself didn't become a burden to you? Forgive me the injustice.
Being cynical, isn't he?
Yeah. Like, and you can see it in the other translations too. Like this translation really shows it well. But over there, it's like, oh, forgive me for like not being a burden, like not asking you for more money to support my habits. Forgive me for not doing that. Like that's.
I don't need it, Jeff.
Yeah. So like, let's see. did I have another note here? Oh, like all this stuff. One of my notes was all this stuff about power and weakness and all that stuff. It sounds like the Sermon on the Mount. It sounds like mustard seeds and all that stuff from the gospel of God, right? Like, so that's I think that's fascinating. All right, let's see. How much time we got? 10 minutes. All right. Can we get through this? Oh, there's a lot left, but he doesn't introduce a bunch of new stuff. So let's keep on going through here. So chapter 12, verse 14. I'm sorry. So now look, this is the third time I'm ready to come to you, and I'm not going to be a burden, because I'm not looking for what belongs to you, but for you yourselves. You hear how he says that? I'm not looking for your belongings. I'm not looking for your wealth. I'm looking for you. It isn't children who ought to put things in store for their parents, you see. It's the parents who ought to be storing things up for their children. Yeah, he's almost saying it's like I should be supporting you type of thing. For my part, I will gladly spend and be spent on your behalf. If I love you all the more, am I going to be loved any the less? What I love that he's doing here is he's making these super apostles, these guys who are obviously asking them for all the money. He's making their ministry just completely undesirable. And these people are like, well, wait a second, like, why are you asking for this? And so verse 16, so grant me this, that I don't lay any burden on you, but maybe I was a trickster and I took you by deceit. Did I cheat you by any of the people I sent you? I urged Titus to go to you and I sent the brother with him. Did Titus cheat you? He behaved in the same spirit as me, didn't he? He conducted himself in the same manner, didn't he? Verse 19, you will imagine we are explaining ourselves again. Well, we are speaking in God's presence, in the Messiah. My beloved ones, it has all been intended to build you up. I'm not afraid, you see, that when I come, I may find you rather different than what I wish. And I may turn out to be rather different than what you would wish. I'm afraid that there may still be fighting and jealousy and anger and selfishness, slander, gossip, arrogance, and disorder. And I'm afraid that perhaps when I come once more, my God may humble me again in front of you, and I will have to go into mourning over many who sinned before and have repented of the uncleanness and fornication and shamelessness, immorality that they have practiced. So he's talking about that visit he wants to come, and he's like, we may all be different when we actually get together. That happens. So then the last chapter, chapter 13, verse 1. This is the third time that I'm coming to you. Every charge must be substantiated at the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses. I said it before when I was with you, and a second time, and I say it now in advance while I'm away from you. To all those who have sinned previously, and to all the others, that when I come back again, I won't spare them. Since you are looking for proof of the Messiah who speaks in me, the Messiah who is not weak towards you, but powerful in your midst. He was crucified in weakness, you see, but he lives in God's power. For we too are weak in him, but we shall live with him for your benefit by God's power. So there he is, finally saying the quiet part out loud, right? Like saying it what he's been alluding to the whole time. He's like, he's crucified in your weakness, but he lives. He's resurrected in God's power. You are weak in him, but you live in him in God's power, type of thing. So verse 5, test yourselves to see if you really are in the faith. Put yourselves through the examination. Or don't you realize that Jesus, the Messiah, is in you? Unless, that is, you failed the test. I hope you will discover that we didn't fail the test. But we pray to God that you will never, ever do anything wrong. Not so that we can be shown up as having passed the test, but so that you will do what is right, even if it means that we appear like people who failed. Like, think about what he's saying in the test, that we'll do the right thing, even if it looks like we messed up. Like, that's a hard thing. And then he explains that he in verse 8, he says the quiet part out loud again. For we cannot do anything against truth, but only for the truth. Like and that sounds like that one phrase he said a couple chapters ago that we focused on. That was like the karma phrase, that he's saying, like, these guys will be found out. Mm-hmm. Their deeds will be found out. And he's saying, like, when we are focusing on what is right, then what's right will come out. I think it's important for all of us. And that's the hard thing, So verse 9, we celebrate, you see, when we are weak, but you are strong. This is what we pray for, that you may become complete and mature. That's why I'm writing this to you while I'm away, so that when I come, I won't have to use my authority to be severe with you. The Lord has given me this authority, after all, not to pull down, but to build up. And that's a critique of the powers of the world, that often the authorities of the world use their power not to build up, but to gain more power from it, right? That's a critique there. Verse 11, all that remains, my dear family, is this. Celebrate, put everything in order, strengthen one another, think in the same way, be at peace. Comfort, my people. Remember all that? And the God of love and peace will be with you. Greet one another with a holy kiss. All God's people send you their greetings. The grace of our Lord King Jesus, the love of God, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with you all.
How many times have we heard that last verse thing?
Yeah. He says it a lot. We actually get most pastors, most good pastors, I'll say, they usually begin with Paul's beginning to his epistles. I'm not a good pastor, so like that's I don't do that. But it's I don't know. Did anyone have any thoughts on 2 Corinthians on this last section? Anything I'd like to add? Got through it though. We're kind of moving fast there at the end, but he's kind of saying, he's just wrapping up all the stuff we established already. So it's a cool book. I'd never really hit it before until this last year. And
even though you wrote all those pages?
Well, that was just that one little section.
Yeah.
And that was an odd verse to do in college. It was like second year in college. As a weird, that wasn't seminary. That was 20-year-old Chris, and so but yeah, no, it's and you study things, but things hit the back burner and all that, and you look at things through new eyes, and these eyes that I have now of looking at everything kind of through the cross. It's amazing to see how Paul writes it and how sarcastic he is, kind of almost using the sarcasm to bring about his points, doing that thing where he makes people laugh and then just goes right into biting, and then goes back into the laughter and just right back into it. It's great. It's great. It's cool. It's cool stuff. And it's cool when you can see it. And because you can see the humanity in Paul, that it's not just some out-of-body experience letter coming in like, this is how you are a good Christian. We see that the Spirit of God works through the church. He works through people. And that's good. It's good news. It's good news.
It makes you aware of how much responsibility you have to serve.
Yeah.
That's what I got out of this.
And that sometimes that also means you're going to suffer as well.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
A lot of people just think by serving everything's going to be hunky-dory.
Exactly.
Yeah. So like becoming a servant and kind of walking in that path of Jesus, walking to the cross. And if bad things happen, it doesn't mean that God's away from you.
Right.
Like that's such an easy thing for us to fall into, is that when it's like, oh no, like in me and my selfish ways, it's like, oh, there was light attendance on Sunday. Everybody hates me. I'm not praying enough. Like that. Like that. That's just looking inside my messed up brain. But we all have those standards by what it means when things are going well.
We had to fire a pastor at St. Andrew for those thoughts.
Oh yeah.
What are we doing next?
So yeah, what are we going to do next?